Good evening. Welcome to Newmarket, New Hampshire Town Hall. Welcome to the second community forum hosted by the Newmarket Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. Tonight we are going to keep talking as we bring tonight another panel of community experts and community leaders to talk about the realities of opiate addiction here in Newmarket. My name is Reverend Patty Marsden. I am the pastor of Newmarket Community Church, and I am a member of the Newmarket Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. We are so happy to be leading this effort here in Newmarket, and we are a nonprofit community coalition who educates and collaborates to prevent and reduce opiate and other drug addiction in Newmarket. If you are interested in joining in this valuable and important work for this community, we invite you to join us. We meet every Wednesday at Newmarket Community Church at 9:30 in the morning. That would be every Tuesday. And we welcome everyone. This is a big problem, and more hands will make light work for the rest of us, and we do hope you can join us. So our format for tonight, we will hear from our panelists over the next 30 minutes. During our entire time together tonight, you are welcome to bring a question forward on one of the index cards you'll find on your seat, and we will take questions. We also offer the opportunity for anyone who is dialing in tonight on Channel 13 or dialing in through our Facebook messaging to send us questions. You can call in, and the call-in number for tonight is 603-659-8501, extension 1321. And we will take all of your questions as we open up for community questions beginning at about 7 o'clock tonight. So as we begin our discussion tonight, our first panelist who will be leading us in conversation tonight is Lieutenant Kyle True from Newmarket Police.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's a privilege to sit here on this panel with everyone here tonight. Again, thank you to you and to the community who's watching it at home tonight. Clearly, Newmarket is not immune from our opiate and heroin and fentanyl problem that's going on the Seacoast right now. We noticed an uptick right around the beginning of the year, if not late last fall. Our numbers skyrocketed with regards to the amount of heroin we were seeing, the amount of heroin-related calls that we were responding to, and the amount of heroin or fentanyl or opiate-related overdoses that we were responding to. It was alarming, and we welcomed with open arms the opportunity to sit on this panel and become part of this group to address this problem, because we clearly realize that this is not a police department issue or a fire department issue or a school issue or a church issue. It's an issue that the community must handle together, and we are glad to be here. I am happy to answer any questions as it relates to the position of the police department and how we respond and our outlook on how we handle this heroin epidemic. And I thank you for coming.
Thank you, Kyle. Our next panelist is Michael Pelzar, who is an emergency respondent here in Newmarket and also works at Kent and Pelzar Funeral Home, and he is here to share his perspective on the opiate problem in Newmarket. Michael.
Good evening. Thank you. As she said, I'm an EMT with Newmarket Fire Rescue. I also work at the Kent and Pelzar Funeral Home. And on the fire department, we do have a substance abuse problem in Newmarket. We see it weekly with the fire department. I also see it at the funeral home. Recently, we had a call with the fire department. 11 o'clock, we were called to a residence. We all come charging in. Our update was unconscious, not breathing, CPR in progress. So it's a real serious call. We arrive. There's a couple people with the patient. The people have blank faces. They're not telling us anything. We're asking for questions. We need details, and just can't get anywhere. After a couple minutes of discussion, eventually it's led to believe that she had taken either heroin or fentanyl, or this was probably an overdose. So we administer Narcan, extricate her from the residence, get her into the ambulance, en route to the hospital. She wakes up And lately it's become a typical call for us. We need, if we're inside your home, we need to find out what's going on. Please give us details. Narcan's a great drug, but it can only work if you tell us what's going on. And so we were fortunate that night. We saved a life, and she's doing well. The other thing is we had to give 8 milligrams of Narcan. The normal Narcan dose is 1 milligram. So we had to give her 8. So if you're at home and you have Narcan, please dial 911 before you administer it. We got to make sure you have help coming in case you don't have enough. Or we also had to secure an airway. If you don't have something to secure the airway, it may not be enough. So please still dial 911. Narcan's great, but it still needs assistance. As far as the funeral home, I work firsthand. I've seen the devastating effects of overdoses. I've worked with families, mostly parents. A lot of the parents have similar stories. They've fought this battle for many years with their loved ones, tried doing everything, and unfortunately they lost the battle. And they all have one common goal. They don't want to ever go through this again. They don't want to ever see anybody else go through it. So they're kind of along the battle lines we are. We're trying to help people, trying to get the word out. And just like Kyle said, if you want to join our group, we welcome you. And we're trying to make Newmarket a better place. I'm proud to be serving on the Newmarket Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. I thank you all for your continued support and your interest in coming tonight. And Newmarket is a great community. I believe with your help and the board's help, we can turn this around. But thank you for coming.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Mike.
Our next panelist is Jim Michaels from Seacoast Mental Health. Jim?
So my name is Jim. I have a master's in science in community mental health and integrated substance abuse services from Southern New Hampshire University. I currently work for Seacoast Mental Health, working at Exeter Hospital and treating clients with co-occurring substance abuse problems in Portsmouth. I also work at Center for Life Management at Parkland Medical Center in Derry. And prior to that, I worked at Northern Human Services, covering the 5 hospitals north of the Notches. And the one thing that is evidently clear, it does not matter where you live, that you are affected by substance abuse. Doesn't matter where it is in the state. Drug addiction and misuse is a national crisis. Newmarket has not escaped the insidiousness of this epidemic. There is no difference in a characteristic by which we define ourselves: young, old, rich, poor, race, religion, creed, nationality, educational experiences. None of it matters. All can be attacked by this enemy of our society, and nobody can say that we're not touched by it. Every day, someone comes into one of the hospitals that I work at suffering from an overdose. Sometimes they're intentional, other times they're accidental, but the outcomes are often the same. Someone we loved, someone who was part of our community, is no longer with us because their lives have ended as a result of some sort of drug overdose. Narcan has come onto the scene, and as Mike said, it's a wonderful drug, but there's also another side to it, is that, as you know, I treat a lot of substance abusers, and they're telling me now that they're actually using more drugs because they'll make sure that somebody with them has Narcan so that they can get as high as they can, and they want to get right to the peak. But if they happen to creep over into an overdose, they got somebody there to hit them with Narcan. So it's two-edged. It's saving lives, but on the other hand, because it's there, there's more lives that could potentially be lost because of it. I want to touch on one more thing. Many of the overdoses that I see in the ER are from medications inside of our own homes. People stealing other people's medications. Tylenol is a huge overdose drug. Often we're stealing other people's medications. With the holidays coming, they're in our medicine cabinets. This is something that we can all do, is to secure our homes from potential overdoses, is to secure your medications. So make sure that you're the only one that can get them. There's a lot of attention on this epidemic that national, state, county, and local leaders are starting to see this as a national tragedy. That being said, it is often slow for things done at levels above us to trickle down to us in our hometowns. I actually work in the trenches, and it's amazing how I'll hear on TV that they're doing something, and we've never actually heard it at our level that this sort of thing is happening. We need to be Gumbies, all of us. the person looking for recovery, those that are helping them. We need to stick to it. We need not to give up. We need to be refused to be held back. We need to fight for recovery like our lives depend on it, because quite frankly it does. There is a bright future before us. I believe that this epidemic can be defeated, and my prayer is that each and every one of us lives out our divine potential, but we can only do it as we all work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Our next panelist is Ms. Kimberly Branch, and she is the facilitator for Heroin Anonymous that is held here in Newmarket. Let's hear from you, Kim.
All right. Hello, my name is Kimberly Branch. My story of addiction starts back in 1999. By 2000, you could call me a full-blown heroin addict. A lot happened in the years following that, the timeline of what I call my struggle. By 2005, I decided I was completely tired of living that way and needed to change my life drastically. It wasn't easy, recovery from heroin, but it's one worth taking. Today, 10 years later, I see suffering addicts every day where I work, and I try to spread the word. A week ago, I was cashing out a man and noticed his heavily tracked arms. I pointed out his marks and asked him how long he'd been doing that to himself. He knew that I knew what it was from. He answered me with years. I told him, "You're worth so much more than this life you live." I told him about the Heroin Anonymous group in Newmarket that I spearhead. You too can find your serenity, and I invited him to a meeting. You shouldn't just pass these people off as just junkies. We're trying to destigmatize that. After all, we're good people making bad decisions. That in itself is why I'm involved in this. I can't sit back anymore and watch this epidemic take more lives without trying to help. It just kills me. People call me call me a brave young lady or an angel. Some even call me a hero. I'm really just a girl with a huge heart. I'm trying to make a difference in the community we live in. I am, although, somebody's mother and sister. I'm a daughter, an aunt, a coworker, and a friend. A heroin addict is not the first name I would call myself today, because I know I am worth so much more. A man asked me today, "How do you become successful in the heroin epidemic?" I didn't have an answer for him at that moment, but I've thought about it all day. My answer would be time. In time, there is healing. You don't wake up in the morning telling yourself, "Hey, I want to be a heroin addict." You can't be cured in a day, but you can take it one day at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And our next panelist is Chris Placey. He is a member of the Governor's Commission for Drug and Alcohol Abuse, Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery. And he is also the owner of the Substance-Free Workplace. Chris.
Thank you. Thank everybody for coming tonight. Obviously, serious issue, and you've heard it from the other panelists here. I just want to talk about New Hampshire a little bit more globally than just Newmarket. In New Hampshire, the economic impact of drug and alcohol use is $1.84 billion. That's billion, B. $1.84 billion. That's what drugs and alcohol costs the state of New Hampshire. And I ask people, is that a concern for you? Just think about that for a second. Businesses, absorb about 66% of that, or about $1.15 billion is from loss of worker productivity, absenteeism, and all of those things. That study came out in 2012. I think about what's happened in the last 2 years and realize we're probably well over that, probably in the 2 billion range economically. So it's a serious problem here in New Hampshire. Some of these people alluded to some of the things that I wanted to talk about, but she really stated it really well. People don't wake up someday and say, "Hey, I think I want to be a heroin addict," because that's a good idea. There's a lot of things that have to happen for people to get to that place. And so my advice to everybody, and I always say this because I believe it, you need to be a student of this disease. And if you truly acknowledge that's a disease, then the solution needs to be to support a disease, not that somebody has done something wrong and we need to punish them. I talk to a lot of people and they say things like, "Why do they do that? Why do people continue to do that?" It's not as easy as somebody just choosing to do something different. It truly is a disease. Our solutions have to be something that would solve a disease, and if we truly believe it, then that's the direction that we need to go in. Arresting people and doing all these things that cause people to be ashamed and feel guilty just are not working. I do have a business called Substance Free Workplace, and to me, the only solutions out there that will work have to be comprehensive. And I love to use the word comprehensive. What I mean by that is every single person has to step up to the plate. We can't say, oh, by the way, why don't we just let law enforcement take care of this? They'll solve the solution. They'll be the solution. We can't look at the hospitals to do it from a healthcare perspective. We need every single person, from citizens to business leaders, education, law enforcement, healthcare. Everybody needs to step up to the plate because it's a huge issue, and it's the only way that it's going to get solved.
Thank you, Chris. So you've heard a bit from our panelists tonight, and now comes an opportunity for all of you here and all of you at home to put forward some questions. For those of you at home, I remind you, you are welcome to call us. That number is 603-659-8501, extension 1321. You're also welcome to message us on the Newmarket ASAP Facebook page. If you put in a message there, we have someone ready to take your message. And for those of you in the audience, you're welcome to bring your question forward to Tony or Sue, who can pick up your card from you. You're welcome to write your questions on the cards. But we have 12 questions already. As you know, this is our second community forum, and so we have some questions that were asked there as follow-up in some of our meeting summary notes, and other questions we've received since that forum that we'd like to start our conversation with this evening. Our first question for this evening, I believe, will go to Chris Placey, and this question is, what can I do to help with this epidemic?
Well, I mean, first, and I already alluded to it, people have to be a student of the disease and understand what you can do to fix it. And I don't mean this cynically, but I think when people are in a situation that is emotionally charged, we notoriously do the wrong thing. Not because we're bad people or we don't want to do the wrong thing, but we just don't know what to do. And if we throw our emotions into it, and that's the driving force to our solutions, that's not always going to be the best course of solution or course of action. So be a student of this disease, truly understand it, and educate yourself to the best practices, the things that actually work. Dispel the myths when people say things that just aren't correct, like that person is just a matter of will, they can do better. Those things stigmatize people. They cause people to feel guilty, which just perpetuates the problem. So really, I mean, I'm in this business. I work with people every single day, and I'm on the internet. I'm looking for new things. ASAM, which is the American Association of Addictive Medicine, in September of 2015, 2 months ago, just redefined the definition of addiction. If they can be redefining it as much as 2 months ago, I think we all need to continue learning about it.
Thank you, Chris. Our next question, where can I go to get help? And I am going to start this question with Jim and hope that maybe between Jim and Chris together, they can help us with where can I get help?
Chris and I were actually talking about this just before we started, in that there's kind of the fallacy or the belief that there's an A, B, C, D process to recovery, and there's not. Every path is different. Some people never step foot inside of a detox or rehab. They never go to NA or AAA. They never go to counseling. They just did it. Other people, I have a friend of mine who he was struggling with an opiate addiction, and his friends took him to deer camp for 2 weeks. They locked the doors, and they didn't let him out. They fed him, kept him cleaned up, and it's been years now since he's used. Now, do I suggest that? Probably not, but it worked. So I think that we have to look at the world that the person lives in. I think, number one, they need supportive people, because I don't think anybody gets sober or becomes abstinent on their own. They need people there. They need people to support them. So I think you need to look towards family, friends, Ministers, priests, those people in your lives that are there for you, police officers, different people in the community. I think that you need to talk to your primary care doctor. There are medications that can be prescribed. I think that if you're at a place where withdrawal is an issue, certainly a detox, possibly rehab. There are Suboxone providers. There's very few of them around here. Last count for me 2 weeks ago was about 9 of them, and most of them are full. There's methadone clinics. There's also a drug called Vivitrol, which is a shot. There's naltrexone, which is a pill that you can take. But these, all have to be prescribed obviously by a doctor. I think that support groups, I think NA is almost essential because it's the Aaron and her effect of being able to support one another. I think you need to talk to your insurance company to find out what benefits you have under your insurance. Here in New Hampshire with expansion Medicaid, there is a substance abuse treatment part to it, but the other 2 do not, so there is no substance abuse treatment there. Don't be afraid to look out of state. Brattleboro Retreat, AdCare. There's different places in different states that you can go. Salvation Army has it's not necessarily inpatient, you live there. Teen Challenge. There's one in Manchester, Brockton, Mass, and in Rhode Island. Connect with your local community mental health center. Online, newhampshiretreatment.org. Whatever piece you're looking for, you can log on there. And if you're looking for detox, you type in detox, it'll show you all the centers in New Hampshire to go to. Google drug and alcohol counselors in your area. The important thing is that they need to do something, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. There has to be something that's moving. Remember that drug abuse and addiction works in the dark, and we need to blow the lid off it to expose it to the light. So I believe the first step is always to share it with somebody that you love, that's around you, that will support you, and then move forward together.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, if you're somebody who has a loved one that has an issue with addiction, care and compassion have to be the 2 driving emotions for that person. And I think too many times people forget that. And also to steal from the recovery movement, which is one of the best things that's hit New Hampshire in a long time for this issue, say to that person, what can I do for you? What can I do for you today? Not try to figure out what they need, not try to tell them what they need. Ask them what they need and treat them with care and compassion. Definitely nhtreatment.org, a ton of resources. The other advice that I would give would be to reach out to people on this panel, people that you know that will help you get to at least somebody that can help you, and utilize whatever resources that are available.
Thank you. Our next question for tonight, I believe, would go to Lieutenant True. What do I do if I find any type of drug paraphernalia on the street?
Okay, well, obviously, first off, do not touch it. When we get these calls quite frequently, we treat all drug paraphernalia as biohazard material. So we will wear protective gloves and use certain types of evidence bags to seal it properly and make sure it's disposed of properly. So my recommendation is, if you were to come across some drug paraphernalia, do not touch it, and give us a call at 659-6636. That is our dispatch center. We will dispatch an officer up there, and we will take it from you. And it might actually be a chance, too, if you do see drug paraphernalia, and if you have a teenager, to educate your child, your teenager, as to what it is and the dangers of it. And again, tell them not to touch it if they should ever find drug paraphernalia. So that's it.
Thank you.
Sure.
And that number again to call, Kyle,
Is
was
659-6636, and that is our dispatch center at the Newmarket Police Department.
Thank you. Next question. I believe we will start with Kim, and this can go between Kim, Kyle, and Jim. What do I do if I know or suspect someone is using? And we'll start with Kim.
Me personally, when I see addicts that are suffering still, I point it out to them. I point out their addiction. I know firsthand, because I've been there years ago, what it looks like or what to look for. And when I see them come in, I'll point out, like, well, how long have you been doing that to yourself? Why are you doing that to yourself? There is another way. You don't have to live that way. Invite them to meetings. I don't know. I point it out to them and tell them, you're not fooling me. You can't fool me. So let's be serious about it and let's talk about it, because they're not really going to deal with their issue if it's hidden from everybody. I don't know if I would recommend everyone else pointing out, hey, you have track marks, but me, I've been there personally offhand, I know, so I do that my way. I don't know, how else would you go about telling someone that they're addicted?
I think that we have to, everything that we do is established through a relationship. So I think that in your case, you can come at it because you actually have a relationship around that.
Yeah.
And it's there. I come at it more in a clinical way, is that, and of course, most of the people I see are in the ER. So in the stages of change, the first stage is pre-contemplation. It's the person, everybody in the world knows they've got a problem but them. So my job as a therapist, as a counselor, is to not necessarily get them to say, hi, I'm Jim, I'm a whatever, but for them to at least get to the place, well, maybe I've got a problem. And the process that we use clinically is called motivational interviewing. So to way oversimplify it, it would be, so you've been using heroin for 6 months, you're now bankrupt, have lost your job, and your wife left you. So how's that working for you? That's kind of crude, but it makes them connect their life to what's happening here. And if at least they can say, well, maybe drugs are involved, we've moved them up the ladder. We want them to get to the place in the action stage of change, which is they're actually willing to do something. Join an NA group, go to detox, rehab, get into therapy, do something. But I think it's all within relationship, because if we start to point the finger, and all of us are like this, if somebody picks out one of your flaws and starts wagging their finger in your face, our walls of defense go up high as can be, and we hear nothing that they say. So I think it was Chris that said compassion, empathy, love, is that we need to be able to open our hearts to them, say, look, I'm here for you, I'm not pointing out, I want to walk this with you, I want to help you to get better, but also to help them to understand, to move through those stages and to point them in the direction that they need to go.
Thank you. Kyle, would you have anything to add?
Sure. Our officers, if we make an arrest and if an officer notices track marks on a person's body, our officers will, in a respectful way, challenge them on that and just ask them about that. How long have you been using? And I find it remarkable that people who are addicted to heroin generally are honest people, and they want to talk about it. And it's usually a very casual conversation between the officer and the person who is in custody. So we do challenge them in a respectful manner, and we ask them, have you ever sought help? We try to get their story. If they've ever sought help, we try to make referrals to Kim's program, the Heroin Anonymous. We've tried to get them to go to the emergency room to seek help. But getting back to your original question of what do I do if I know somebody who's using, which I believe was your question, I think clearly you need to talk to them. But also I think people are afraid to call the police if they have a child who's using. I can assure you this, if anyone in the community was to call the police department and say, my child, I believe, is using heroin, I promise you that the police are not going to come up to your house and kick your door down and execute a search warrant. That's not what we're about with this problem. We're going to try to help you. We're going to come talk to your son or your daughter. We're going to try to find resources for you, whether it's through someone here on the panel or if it's through an emergency room. But I don't want the community to think that if they call the police department they're going to be in trouble. That's not how we're operating. We've changed the culture, and I believe that we've changed the culture of law enforcement across the state when it comes to this heroin epidemic. I remember years ago when we came across people who were addicted to heroin, who even overdosed, we would arrest them. That has gotten us nowhere. And I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, that it was a statistic that Chris told me that our biggest resource for in-house drug treatment facility is the New Hampshire State Prison. That shocks me. So incarcerating people is not going to get us out of this problem. So feel free to call the police department. You will not be in trouble. We are here to work for you and to work with you.
And to add to this.
Can I add something to that? Just because part of what I do is, to train supervisors to recognize and address issues in the workplace, and also when I do parent programs to help parents recognize and address it. And I think one of the most important things you need to do right off the top is don't mention drug and alcohol use. Say to them from a care and compassionate standpoint, say to them from a non-judgmental standpoint that you care about them as a person. I notice this is going on. I notice, you're not going to school like you used to. I notice your grades have fallen. I noticed, your friends are, giving you a hard time. What's going on? What can I do to help you? The reason why you do that is because when somebody who has an issue like drug use, they know what they're doing isn't a good thing. And if somebody comes to them from a care and compassionate, non-judgmental standpoint, they know you're a safe person to talk about their issue. They're going to tell you about their drug use without you even asking if you present yourself in that way. When I teach business owners, I don't tell them, how do you talk to a drug user? I teach them to address the issues caused by the drug use, and the person will tell you by themselves almost all the time.
So we had a write-in from our Facebook page that I will add on to this question. It's similar, but adds a little bit of a different flavor, and it was specifically addressed to Kimberly. What should I do for my friend who lives in a different state who is addicted to opiates? What kind of friend support is best in this situation? And I'll address it to Kimberly and also open it up to anyone else who has an opinion on that.
I've had friends with heroin addictions, even recently. I bug them every day. I call them on the phone. I text them just, hey, how are you doing today? Or, hey, what are you doing? I just don't typically give them a lot of space. I want to know, are you okay? Are you clean? What's going on in your life? Trying to be the best friend that I can be, even if it's from a far distance. Just bug them. Blow their phone up.
Thank you. Next question. What are the top 3 things to look for to determine if someone is using? And I believe that question should go to Jim.
Which one are you going to pick?
Exactly. Because we can't pigeonhole what an addiction is. So in my answering the question, I kind of umbrellaed it, and then there's a ton of things that fit underneath it. This is really the topic that I spent 20 minutes on at our last session. But I think that there's the first big umbrella thing is change in previous functioning. That if the person had never been late for work, their grades were high, they were very social, they had a lot of friends, they were involved in recreational things, some area of functioning, then all of a sudden it stops. I think it's a legitimate question for us to ask, what happened? It doesn't have to be drugs, but something happened that they stopped ice fishing, they stopped deer hunting, they stopped being to work on time. Something happened. So I think it's legitimate to ask that. And that kind of plays to what Chris was saying, is that we're not saying you're an addict, we're just saying something happened. What can we do to help you? Looking for giving up activities that once were enjoyed. This is one of the first questions I ask in the ER, is that we look back and often I have to get this from a collateral from somebody else. It's like, have they stopped doing things that they really liked? Art class, lacrosse, playing football. Yeah, like a year ago. And we'll find, particularly people where it's developed into an addiction, it's then that they started to use. And so that became their world, and everything else began to disappear. The other thing is changing in appearance. I had told you, I think at the last session, maybe I didn't, I was treating a person who for almost a year, and every time that they came to my office and they were dressed to the nines, I knew they were sober. When they came and they hadn't washed their hair in 2 or 3 days, and they had their unwashed sweatpants and sweatshirt on, and she asked me at the end of treatment, she's like, how did you know every time I was using, you knew I was using? It was just simply the way she was dressed. It was different. So we need to look at change in appearance, not performing ADLs, activities of daily living, not taking showers, not cooking, not paying their bills, those sort of things. Heroin specifically gives us the, I just don't care. You know, you don't care about nothing. That's part of the appeal of it, is that you don't care. You feel nothing. So you stop taking care of yourself and things that you should. Change in mental status. A person who was once happy is now incredibly sad. A person who used to be very calm is now very irritated. And of course, the biological changes, particularly for heroin, is the pinned eyeballs. If you got pinned eyeballs and you're inside, or the other side, if it's an amphetamine and their pupils are all black, you know, there's things that we can look at. Another thing that there's a person who I'm treating currently that when he's using, he gets the head bobs really badly. And I'll point it out to him. You were using today, weren't you? He says, how do you know that? So once again, it's just being mindful. It's paying attention to what's around us and just kind of looking at these things in these clumps, and functioning, appearance, and biology.
I just want to reiterate one thing you said, because I think it's totally important. You need to recognize when somebody's not their normal self. That it can be encapsulated in just that. And again, it's not about whether they're using drugs or wouldn't you want to be there to help somebody that you care about if they're just having a bad day, or you know, their friend and them just had a big argument and that caused them some turmoil. If you recognize when somebody's not their normal self and you can intervene much earlier, you can stop it from getting to full-blown addiction, I think.
Thank you. Next question. What if I'm at a party and a friend overdoses? Will I get in trouble too? And we'll start that with Michael.
Yeah, that's a great question. Certainly call 911, and like the police department said, they're not charging anybody nowadays, and they're not looking for people to get in trouble. Definitely call 911. Nobody's going to be in trouble, and I'll let Lieutenant True comment on it also.
I just want to clarify what Michael said when he said you're not going to get in trouble. With certain portions of this epidemic, you're not going to get in trouble. And there's a Good Samaritan law that our legislators passed this year, and it's under the Controlled Drug Act. It's actually RSA 318-B:2, if anyone wanted to look it up. And what it does is, if you are at a party or you're with a friend, and your friend overdoses, and you call 911, you receive immunity when the police show up, which is a good thing, because we want you to be honest with us, and we want you to be honest with the EMTs and the paramedics who show up, because their life's at danger. So if you dial 911, you will receive immunity from any type of prosecution, whether you have drug paraphernalia on you or if you have drugs on you, as long as you are acting in good faith. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, good, thank you. And a call-in question, and I'll pose it to the panel and let first one to respond. Should students try to do something to help with this epidemic?
Oh, can I answer that?
Sure, Chris, you go.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, the kids are the ones that should start taking the lead on this. I mean, they're the ones that are out there and really know what's going on. And I'll tell you, I told this story a little bit a while ago. I went to the Senate Finance Committee meeting a few months ago when they were talking about the budget, and some students from Plymouth High School were there and talked about how the game of whack-a-mole was about how we've addressed the substance abuse issue in the state of New Hampshire. And I'm telling you, when those kids spoke, every single adult was listening. And, you know, it comes down to the fact of the matter is what they believe and what they think is really important, and we need to listen. And they have a huge impact on their peers, and they need to be given the ability and the confidence to take the power that they really have, because they can make some pretty astounding progress with this issue.
Has there been some conversation about programming for youth in the Newmarket High School that anyone can speak to?
Well, I'm pretty sure they're involved in, I don't know if they call it this, but I know the Dover Youth to Youth program is something that they're doing. They do have lots of programs over there that empower the kids to do some really good things around this issue and others, and how they message it. But absolutely, peer-to-peer is very powerful, and the kids do need to feel that they do have a voice. They have a voice, and we need to let them know they've got a voice and invite them into these conversations. I wish there were some students here tonight.
Great, thank you. Another question that came in from a Facebook user tonight. I would like information on groups for family members of addicts, whether they are active or in recovery. Anyone? Chris?
Well, there are a lot of groups out there. I don't know if there's a specific place that you can go to. Is that on NH treatment? Do they have different? They don't probably have that on there.
And I just got it in my email today, so I can't recite it, but I know it's in Manchester. That there's a group that is actually centering around families of people who have had family members that have overdosed, for support and encouragement and that sort of stuff. But I just got it today, and I forget the name of it, but you could probably find it online.
Yeah, I mean, and definitely reach out to some. I mean, I know of lots of them, but reach out to somebody, because there's a lot of parent support groups. There's a lot of, you know, AA meetings, NA meetings. They're out there. It's just a matter of hooking people up to those. I just don't know that there's a specific website or anything like that that you can go to.
So as a follow-up to this question this evening, we have launched our Newmarket ASAP website. It's www.newmarketasap.org. It is new and a bit under construction, but what we will do is answer this question more fully on our website, which will happen in the next day or two, so we can provide a full answer to this question. All right, next question. How do I talk to a medical provider about opioid prescriptions to avoid overprescription? And that question can go to Jim.
Jim's writing. I work with a lot of doctors. I work with a lot of psychiatrists, primary care doctors, Suboxone providers. I asked this question because I knew it was coming, of all of them, and every one of them had a different answer. The one thing that they all had in common was that doctors treat symptoms and illnesses, and that going to a doctor and asking for an opiate or a painkiller is not a medical problem. Doctors cure or try to treat a medical problem. So two doctors said to me that they have a bias against prescribing opiates. Doesn't mean that they won't do it, but they have a bias just because of the epidemic, the heroin problem. So what many of them had suggested is talk to your doctor about your symptoms and your functioning. Okay? I can't go to work because my back hurts. I can't concentrate on school because I have headaches, whatever, because it's symptoms that they're looking to treat. I can't tell you how many times that when people come to either hospitals, either to Exeter or to Parkland, is that there's a little thing, it'll say chief complaint, and it'll say looking for Percocet. Well, what do you think? I mean, I don't know if any of you are doctors, but what would that say to you? What are they looking for? Okay, where if they come in saying I have back pain, whatever, it's completely different in the mindset of the doctor. If you've had a drug problem in the past, it's really important that you're honest with your doctor about that. Talk about possibility of tolerance, withdrawal, and addictions to medications, and how can this be avoided. nobody intends to be an addict, but through surgery, back, brain surgery, whatever, and they put you on some Dilaudid, 4 milligrams of Dilaudid 3 times a day. Take that for a month and just stop. That's not going to be pretty. So talk with your doctor about what is this medication going to do to me? How are you planning on treating me to come off of this so that I don't experience withdrawal, that it does not become a problem, but my pain is still taken care of. If you've ever taken painkillers in the past, let them know what the side effects are. There are side effects to all drugs. We need to know what they are. This one, every doctor told me this: develop a long-term relationship with your doctor. If your doctor knows who you are, he's going to know you. He's going to know how to treat you properly. And along with that one, it's probably equal to, is just be completely honest. That's what they needed.
Thank you. I have a question to maybe add on to you, Jim, but I'll open it up to others. It came from our audience tonight. And the question is desomorphine in our state?
I have no clue what desomorphine is. What is it?
I know morphine, but yeah, I'm not familiar with that either.
Synthetic morphine, broken down to codeine, using household chemicals.
Oh, okay. In the work stuff, I haven't seen it that much in my drug testing, but I don't know.
So it doesn't appear that we have active knowledge of that being in our state, but that would be another question that we should do some follow-up research, and we'll do that and provide that answer on our website and our Facebook page as well.
Yeah.
Next question, similar topic. Tylenol was mentioned as a home drug most common for overdose. What other over-the-counter drugs are commonly abused?
Dextromethorphan, which is cold medicine, which is the reason that it got put behind the cabinets. You can make crystal meth out of over-the-counter stuff. Overdose, by definition, and maybe I'm being too overly simplistic, but it's taking a medication outside of the way it is prescribed. So an overdose doesn't have to lead to death. An overdose is just taking more than you're supposed to. So if the bottle says take no more than 2 500 milligram Tylenol 3 times a day, and you take it 4 times a day, technically you overdosed. You took more than the dosage. So any drug can fall under the category. All drugs by definition affect brain structure. So all drugs can be used to overdose. Now, will they all kill you? No. But will there be some effect to it? Absolutely yes. Whether it's just vomiting or death, it can run the gambit. But Tylenol is the big one with, because Percocet is an opiate with Tylenol. So not only do you have the overdose of the opiate, but you have the overdose of the Tylenol at the same time. Which CDC requires that you're checking it, making sure the Tylenol level isn't coming up, the person's medically cleared, those sort of things. So it's anything.
Thank you. This is a question from the audience for Lieutenant True. Actually, I have 2 for Lieutenant True, one from our call-in and one from the audience. I'll start with, who should we be after, the user or the dealer? Because I'm wondering who is more dangerous. And that was a call-in tonight.
Well, from our perspective, it's the dealer. Whether it is a street-level dealer, a mid-level dealer, or a high-level dealer, or an international dealer. We responded to a heroin overdose within this week, a couple days ago, and an individual dispensed heroin to a friend. Technically, it's a sale. It's dispensing. It wasn't a for-profit type sale, but technically it's dispensing. So to answer the question, I would say definitely we should be going after the dealers and not the users. We should be getting the users the help that they need.
And what is the average street price of a hit or a dose, or I don't know what you'd call it, of heroin?
Well, it's obviously, it's very cheap at this time. A lot of the people, and I'm sure Jim can speak to this, a lot of the people who are addicted to heroin started off on pills, whether it's OxyContin was a big one. And when the OxyContin, when they ran out of the prescription for OxyContin, they turned to something cheaper, which was heroin. And we live very close to the Massachusetts border. Some of our source cities are Lawrence, Methuen, Haverhill, which is a 9-iron away. You can be down there and back within an hour and a half. The average price, I would say it's probably between $7 and $10 a bag right now for a hit. Obviously, the more you buy, the cheaper the price is going to be.
So another question for you, Lieutenant True. How has policing changed regarding drug use?
Well, I've been doing it I'm in my 23rd year now, and it's changed dramatically, especially with this epidemic that we're going through right now. And there's a gentleman in the audience, Rick Bodette, who's been working with me on this coalition. And we've tried to change the culture of Newmarket Police Department from arresting and prosecuting to let's slow down, let's look at the big picture here, and let's get these people help. So the philosophy with dealing with this epidemic has gone from arrest and incarcerate to intervene and get help, get them well. A long time ago, I had someone who was addicted to heroin in the booking room, and they described heroin as their food. It's what they needed. They weren't trying to get high, they were trying to get so they weren't in pain. And that opened my eyes a little bit when they described the drug as their food.
Thank you. Next question goes to Jim, and this came from Facebook. What help is available to those who do not qualify for Medicaid or their private insurance is inadequate?
Wow. I'm going to assume that there's no financial resources, because there are a couple places in the state that will do private pay, but they want 10 days up front at anywhere between $400 and $600 per day, so they want $6,000. That's not going to happen for most people. Community mental health centers all community mental health centers have a sliding fee scale. So if you're at the place where you're at the lower end of income, you could certainly be seen. Not all treat substance abuse disorders directly, but certainly you can have treatment there. I know that Seacoast Mental Health has a 24/7 emergency call-in line that you can call, so that you can kind of talk to somebody and kind of triage what to do with it. Sometimes it is to go to a hospital for an assessment. Sometimes it's NewHampshireTreatment.org and say, okay, what is it we've got here? That's the problem. I mean, from my perspective at the ER, that's the problem in New Hampshire, is that if you've got good insurance, I can send you nearly anywhere. If you're loaded, there's lots of places, the places on TV with the nice pools and the back rubs, you can go there. But most of us, and if you don't have the insurance to cover it, I wish I had a better answer. That's really at the state level. They need to be able to provide treatment for people to detox, to rehab. If it requires long-term housing, certainly you can go to, like I mentioned earlier, Salvation Army Teen Challenge, which kind of free, but you can certainly go there, but those are live-in for 12 to 18 months. There are, I can't think of anybody that does indigent substance abuse treatment. And sadly, what happens a lot in the ER is people come in and threaten to be suicidal so that we can actually send them to the state hospital because they just want to feel safe. It's a horrible place to detox, but for them it's better than detoxing on the street.
This is a really important issue. I mean, New Hampshire's next to last, 49th in the United States for availability of treatment. There's only one state worse than New Hampshire, and that's Texas. And this is a really important issue because ultimately there are people that aren't going to be able to get treatment that need it. That's the reality of it. And so I think, you know, everybody needs to step up and call your legislators, do whatever you need to do to realize that that's one of the problems that we have. I actually heard from a woman just this week who has health care for her son. She still can't get him into treatment with health care, with a benefit for substance abuse addiction, because there's no place for them to go. We can only treat about 6% of the people that need substance abuse treatment in the state of New Hampshire, 6%. And to me, this is really relevant. Can you imagine any other disease? Can you imagine if somebody you knew or loved had cancer and somebody said to you, oh, you know, you need treatment for cancer, but, you know, we just don't have a place for you right now. You're going to have to wait 3 to 4 weeks before you can get to treatment. And oh, by the way, you have to call in every day to keep your spot on the list. If you don't call in one day, you're going to get put back to the end of the list. Unless you have cash. If you have cash, we might be able to help you. Can you tell me, what would New Hampshire do if that's how we treated people with cancer? New Hampshire would be up in arms and this problem would be solved. And to me, this is one of the issues that needs to be taken care of because it's a tragedy.
Thank you. Next question that goes for Kim, and this is a question from our audience. How did your drug abuse start and what helped you?
How did my drug abuse start? I lost my father when I was 15 years old, and I didn't know how to grieve. I was just a kid. I didn't know, you know, what the process of grieving looked like or what to do. And it lasted many years. I took fault of my dad's death on myself, and it took me 5 or 6 years to figure out how to grieve over that and to realize that it wasn't my fault at all. Everything else I did to myself was being able to not feel the pain that I had inside. I didn't want to feel that. Today I know what that looks like. I know what that pain looks like. I know how to grieve. I know how to get through that process, and it makes things a lot easier for me as things come to me on a daily basis. It could be anything that happens during the day. I know how to get through it. I tell myself, this too shall pass. Just one moment at a time.
And so the best way that you got through all of it was just that.
Hard-headedness
another
and
part to your story that you shared before.
hard-headedness and willingness. I didn't have rehab to tell me. I mean, I went to many rehabs. Nobody gave me a final answer on, this is how you do this. There is no golden path. It's all about willingness. And are you willing to change your life over? Are you tired of living the way you've been living all this time? And if the answer is yes, you definitely can get through it. And it's definitely worth it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question from an audience member. And I believe this would go to Kyle, or at least start with Kyle. What happens to someone arrested who has no insurance? Where do the police go from there with the individual?
If they get arrested,
If you guys take them into custody and you said you want to intervene instead of arrest them.
okay, I follow you. Well, it wouldn't start with an arrest. It would start with like if anything, it would be a protective custody. And our first step would be the Exeter Hospital, to the emergency room. And then from there, hopefully the Exeter Hospital would be able to walk you through these steps of finding a bed. And we've already talked about it. It's very difficult to find a bed right now. But that's how we would handle it. And whether it's we drive you over, or if you're sick, the ambulance would bring you over. But I just wanted to make that sure. When we intervene in this type of scenario where someone's sick from heroin or sick from fentanyl, they're not under arrest. If anything, it would be a protective custody where we're giving you a ride to the hospital.
And so they wouldn't let them leave the hospital? I'm just saying, 'cause like.
Well, I'm going to refer that to
it-
Jim.
We can only hold a person at a hospital in the state of New Hampshire if they're dangerous to self or to others or unable to care for themselves as a result of a mental health disorder. So that would be under an IEA law, okay, involuntary emergency admission to one of the 4 designated receiving facilities in the state. If a person comes in with an identified substance abuse disorder, we cannot hold them there. So if they choose, once they've kind of gotten a nap, 3 hots and a cot, whatever, for a day, and then they want to go, they can go. We cannot force them. If they wish to voluntarily stick around, and we can, we'll try to find them a bed, depending on their insurance, those sort of things. If they're not in our catchment area, we can certainly refer them to the community mental health center in their catchment area. But as far as coming to the ER, I just want to play off what the lieutenant said, was that I have never known, ever, in any of the hospitals I've ever worked in, to know a person that has come to the police and been under the influence, that they've come to the ER under arrest. It's never happened. They've always come PC, protective custody. They're there to be kept safe. We evaluate safety. If they wish to be hospitalized, we try to make that happen. But if they wish to go, they have the right to go under state law.
Thank you. This next question came in from a caller, and it is pointed to Michael Pelzar. What would happen if someone was to make something worse than heroin? I wonder if it was supposed to be take. I'll point it to you, Michael. And
Yeah, we find this with the ambulance a lot. Our biggest fear is we're going to be called to a residence and we're going to think it's fentanyl or it's heroin overdose, which Narcan treats those two. But if it's not, and it's something, a different type of drug, that's our biggest fear, and that's why we treat every case like it's an emergency. That call I mentioned earlier, we called out 12 guys just so we could get the patient out of the house as fast as we can and get them to the receiving hospital as fast as they can. Yeah, not all drugs can be reversed, and that's the sad part. That's the scary part. And
Yeah,
I don't know, Jim may have more.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that one of the insidious parts of heroin is that rarely are you going to get pure heroin. It's going to be stomped on or cut with something. And I think it was like 2 months ago, there's actually a person who had gotten very little heroin, but mostly it was rat poisoning. So you can only imagine what rat poisoning is going to do to you. But there's no lab test for us to be able to pick up cannabinol or whatever the drug is that's in it that's been cut with. So sometimes emergency services is hitting them with the Narcan, and that's kind of helping a little bit with the opiate piece, but you've still got a whole nother drug in there that we have no clue that even exists.
thank you. Next question. At what age do I start talking to my children about substance abuse? I'm afraid to say the wrong thing. And that goes to Chris.
Well, at what age do you start this? And I say it's the day the kid's born. People will tell you, well, first of all, a lot of addiction or the chance of being an addict is genetic. Huge part of it is. A huge part is environmental. It's the environment that you create for your children is really where a lot of these issues start. So, there's a lot of surveys out there from youth risk behavior surveys and stuff that I've read. Kids expect us to be good role models. You probably wouldn't expect that to be the #1 answer. Most kids expect their coaches, people that they look up to be a good role model. And you need to start that on day one. If you start that when they're 16 and they've already done a whole bunch of things, yeah, there's things we can do, but it's not a great scenario. And the outcomes are certainly not what they would be if we did the right things early on. Learn what to say. I would say, again, educate yourself at each age category. If you go to drugfreenh.org, for example, it tells you when your son or daughter is 3 to 5, this is what you should be saying to them. when they're 6 to 8. This is what you should be saying to them, because it's about their development, the things that mean the most to them, where they are at the time. I do parenting programs. That's one of the components that we actually do to help parents learn what the right things to say is. But ultimately, the problem with parents is not that they say the wrong thing, it's that they don't say anything. Kids will tell you that. I know if you go, again, drugfreenh.org has a lot of great stuff on there, and there's an individual who started smoking marijuana at 13 or 14. By the time he was 15 or 16, he was a heroin addict. He played football. He had good grades. And he said that his parents never really talked to him about it. And that's pretty common. So it's not that you'll say the wrong thing so much as that you don't say anything. You need to have those conversations. Kids need to know what's expected from them. Clear, consistent rules.
Thank you.
My daughter's 8.5, and I've already started talking to her about drugs. I'm very honest with her. She knows that I run an HA group. She doesn't know about my past addiction. I think 8.5 is a little bit too much to tell her exactly what I went through, because it's too much for me to handle sometimes. But I definitely let her know that Mama's doing good things for people, and that she definitely should never do drugs because she's worth more than that. And I remind her of that every time we talk about it.
I guess I forgot to mention next Tuesday, the 23rd, at Newmarket High School, or is that Monday? I'm sorry, Monday. I'm going to be talking to parents at Newmarket High School from 7 to 8, just a general talk type thing. But then from there, starting once a month from on December 16th, every third Wednesday, I believe it is, there's 6 different series or topics that I'm going to be talking about in Newmarket. As far as this issue and parenting and building resilience, neuroscience, the neuroscience, parents need to know the neuroscience. Your comment about it's their food is spot on with neuroscience. It's unbelievable.
Great.
So anyway.
Thank you.
Could I reinforce some observations that reinforce what Chris has been saying?
Absolutely. Sure.
My name is Bruce, and I've been running...
Would you like to come right over, though, and get on a microphone, because we are
Come over here,
people
Bruce.
dialing in, and would welcome you to join right over here and speak into the microphone, please.
My name is Bruce, and I've been running a mentoring program for kids in middle school, and they're all vulnerable kids, otherwise they won't be mentored. And we work with the guidance counselors to determine if they would fit that profile, and they all do, and they know their kids. But the thing is, we're facing a great disconnect in communications between the parents and the children. The conversations are not taking place. And our mentors quite often to try to build up hope with the youngster who's being visited once a week for 1 hour by a college student is to kind of get them prepared to come to school every day, to not be a behavior problem, to do their homework, and to get their legs and let them know they're okay, they belong. And after a while, they start to buy into that because this person becomes their trusted companion. And then one day, they'll ask them, well, what do you folks do for a living? This is the disconnect. They don't know. Now, you might find this hard to believe, but many of the kids don't know what their parents do for a living because there's no conversation going on at home. And that's pretty sad. I'll give you a real example. Not only do we do mentoring, but we do an anti-bullying program in schools. And we'll use my hometown, Winnicott in Hampton, the regional high school. We were talking to 30 young freshmen at Winnicott High School, and we had a lull in the conversation. And so just for the heck of it, I asked the kids, How many of you know how to use 911? This is not believable, but true. 20% knew how to use 911, and these are freshmen in high school. And I think we sometimes go by the simple things and assume people know. And we got to stop assuming people know. And the Department of Safety used to have people go around to different organizations all over the state and teach them about 911, including senior citizens. They don't do this anymore. They did it out of Concord. You probably remember that. And so they're not getting the word. And the question was asked, well, what do you call if you want to find out about treatment or recovery, stuff like that? And it made me think that we now have another service, an information service called 211. I don't know what agency is behind it, but I believe it's a state agency. I don't know how up to speed they are, and they should be up to speed with any advance regarding important information that anyone would want. And I don't believe that's happening. And it's got to happen. And many of us have lists about different resource services, but these guys should have they should be the encyclopedia for what's going on when it comes to needed information. So I just thought I would share that stuff with you.
Thank you.
This 911, if only 20% of the freshmen at Winnicott High School know the process, what do you think is going on in Newmarket?
Right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
I'd like to add something to the youngest person that I've treated for an overdose was 7. When I asked them why they had done what they did, they said, well, when mommy and daddy get a headache, they take a pill, and I didn't feel good, so I took a pill. Now, they're 7, so they don't get that there's different kinds of pills for different things. So a lot of what we're teaching our kids, 80% of our communication is nonverbal. So they're going to emulate the things that we do. So part of our education of our kids is them understanding that, if you take a pill I'm on insulin. So I'm diabetic, and all my kids know that I take a needle. This is why I take the needle. I take this pill. This is why I take the pill. This is what it does for me. So that they understand that this is something prescribed by a professional for me, for my symptoms. And if there's something wrong with you, we'll take you to a doctor so that they can treat your symptoms. But if we leave that piece out and they just see us doing it, then they're going to say, well, when daddy doesn't feel good, he takes a pill. And so then a kid at school is going to say, well, you don't feel, I got a pill that will take care of that. Their thought is, well, mommy does it. So we can see how the communication, it's very much has to be verbal, but it's a lot of our nonverbals. They're going to emulate the things that we do.
Thank you. Next question. Now, we've spoken a lot about what we would do if we assume or think or suspect that someone has a drug problem. This next question is a little bit different. What would I do if someone actually tells me they have a drug problem? And that question goes to Jim.
This goes to, we've talked, different people have mentioned the golden path. First of all, there is not one. So we have, what is it that they are willing to do? A long time ago, therapy was revolved around me, the professional, telling you how to get there. That does not work. What we have to do, whether it's professionally as a therapist, whether it's I'm in my office, whether it's I'm in the ER, or if it's a friend of mine, my job is to hold their hand and say, where is it that you want to go, and I will help you to get there. It's not me telling them how to do it. It's me certainly helping them if I need to make phone calls, if I need to give them a ride, if I need to help in any way that I can help. It's being a friend. It's because as soon as we start telling them and it doesn't work, it becomes our fault. What we want, every person has to take responsibility for their own behavior. They have to take responsibility for their own addiction, and that they also have to take responsibility for their own recovery. You're only going to stay in recovery if you want to stay in recovery. Now, we can build walls around that with NAs and support groups and therapy and all different kinds of things, but it ultimately comes down to what does the person want to do and how do we help them get there?
Next question. What do I do with leftover pain prescriptions? And that question goes to Kyle.
There's a couple different options that you have. The easiest option is you can bring it to the Newmarket Police Department. Right in our dispatch center, we're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We do not close. So bring it right to the police department dispatch, ask to speak to an officer. Keep it in its original bottles as you dispense them to us. And we will have them disposed. There's a process that we have to go through the court system to get those drugs disposed of. And we actually bring them to a place in Concord to have them incinerated. We have to get a court order to have them destroyed. We have to watch the drugs be destroyed, and then we have to return it to the court that we've destroyed it. And we do usually about 3 to 4 burns a year. So you can bring it to us and we'll destroy it. For people living outside of Newmarket, some agencies, it's relatively few, but some agencies actually have a drop box where you can just drop it in to inside their dispatch center. We are not set up for that yet. And I believe you could bring that back, depending on the pharmacy may take the drugs back from you to be destroyed. I do know that there was some legislation that was in the works to have that happen.
Great, thank you. Next question. Where do prescription drug abusers get prescription drugs? And is it only prescription drugs I have to worry about? I know we talked a little bit about that. And then again, talking about the over-the-counter medications. But so Chris, where do prescription users and abusers get the prescription drugs?
Well, about 65% of it's from their own house, from relatives and family members. That's where they're getting it. All the surveys will show you that. The drug dealer that we need to worry about right now isn't a drug dealer. It's what the kids can find on their own in our medicine cabinets, in a family member's medicine cabinet, in a friend's home medicine cabinet. So, you know, that's why we all need to step up and be very cautious of where our medications are. Are you locking them? I recommend every single person lock your medications at home. How do you know somebody might come over, a friend, and take your medication? So most people are actually getting it from their family members or friends, about 65%.
Thank you.
Oh, was there another part of that question?
Well, is it only prescription drugs I have to worry about was the second part, but I think that we talked about that earlier when we talked about, if you wanted to talk a little more about that.
I mean, absolutely not. I mean, you know, right now the topic is heroin and prescription medications. And 2 years from now, we're going to be talking about something totally different unless we do a much better job for prevention in general. You know, just about a year ago, last August, there was a big problem in Manchester. In fact, the governor declared a state of emergency because of synthetic marijuana. You know, at that time, that was the big issue. So it's really not about a specific drug. I know tonight we're talking about heroin because it's the big issue right now. But it's really about all drugs, all medications, anything that people can take. And like I said, you know, 5-6 years ago, we weren't talking about heroin. We were talking about other things. 2 years from now, we'll be up here talking about something different.
Thank you. And what about for the people who just want to learn more? Are there programs available out there? And I'll kind of open that up to both Jim and Chris. And how might you answer that question?
There is a ton, more than you could read in a lifetime, at SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration website. Any drug, anything you could think of, they've got a pamphlet, a research study, NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse.gov, that has a ton of information. This is all government research. This is the stuff that is up in the clouds and is slowly trickling down to us here. So if you want to kind of skip all of that and go right to what's happening at the federal level, that's definitely the place to go. Most of it's free. They'll send it to your house. You can buy, when I get it in box loads and hand it out for free. You can use it for yourself, for your friends. You got someone that's struggling with something. It's got a search box, so say you're looking up dextromethorphan, you can Google it up, it'll come up with the information, you can get some pamphlets about it, learn some stuff about it.
Yeah, that's a great website. NIDA is another one, NIDA. And also specific to New Hampshire, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but Drug-Free NH has a lot of really good things for parents, for people just interested. Also, as part of that website is Check the Stats, which will tell you specific to New Hampshire stats of what's going on, what kids are actually doing. I think everybody would be really surprised about what's really going on compared to what we think's going on.
Thank you. Last question for Chris. You talked about New Hampshire's number 49 in the treatment game. We aren't doing very well with that. Where are we in the prevention piece of that? And then further, is there a best practice, or is there a state that's way ahead of us that we can learn from as we consider what we can be doing for prevention in Newmarket?
Well, I mean, this is a very long answer. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible. But since around 2000, I guess it was 1999, New Hampshire passed a law that 5% of the sale of alcohol was supposed to go to preventing whatever that alcohol and drugs was causing to have happen. To my knowledge, it was only funded one time. Each year, the legislature had suspended that law and thrown all the money, the 5%, into the general fund and given back to the state, to the the Governor's Commission, which I sit on. That's our working budget. For the last few bienniums, it was about $1.5 million that basically kept the treatment contracts going. There was zero money for prevention. Zero. I mean zero. If it wasn't for the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, which gave up, which is giving $12 million over 10 years for prevention, New Hampshire would basically have no prevention funding, which to me is a tragedy. Last year, New Hampshire made about $170 million on the sale of alcohol. So the Governor's Commission, or the 5% of that, should have been $8.5 million. Well, $8.5 million is a long ways from 1.5. And again, those are the knowledge things that people need to know, and we need to step up and make people held accountable for not following through what actually was legislation. So there really is very little funding for prevention. About 29% currently. We just did the budget for the Governor's Commission. I believe it was about 29% of our budget now, because we did get some extra funds thanks to people like Ginny Forrester, Senator Forrester, who stepped up and said, listen, fund the fund. They funded it about 1.7%, which again is a long ways from 5%, but at least it was a significant more amount of money. So about 29% now is in prevention. I think prevention and recovery is where the cost-effective, really good work that we can do. As you go up the ladder to treatment, as we've said, there's not a lot of treatment, and whatever is out there is really expensive. The solution to this is prevention and recovery. It's cost-effective, and it will work.
You briefly discussed some legislation that can help to get more funding for prevention, and one of the next steps for the Newmarket Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention is we are working with New Futures to look for opportunities to bring advocacy training to Newmarket. We're not an advocacy organization, but yet people ask, how can we help? And there are many ways to help with the drug abuse problem in Newmarket. One of them, for some of us, might be to understand how we can advocate for legislation that will help to focus more federal dollars, state dollars on prevention. So you'll be seeing more of that on our website and on our Facebook page as we pin down those training dates with New Futures as well. We had another caller, and next question. I believe these will likely, well, one of them goes directly to you, Kyle. And I know you've talked a little bit about it, but I think people obviously want to hear a little bit more. What is Newmarket PD doing to combat the heroin problem in Newmarket?
Well, if you deal heroin, you have a target on your back. We will aggressively go after you, and we will prosecute you to the fullest of the law if you're a dealer. If you're in possession of heroin, you will be arrested. If you are an addict who is sick, we're going to find you help. Our goal is not to incarcerate you, it's to find you help. However, the individuals who are out there pushing this awful drug should not sleep well at night, because there are several active investigations going on as we speak, and we aggressively will prosecute you.
Thank you. Next question, and I'm not sure. I'm going to let you guys decide who picks it. What if I see someone using drugs and they try to tell me off? That came in from a caller tonight.
Well, I mean, ultimately, you can't make somebody that you don't know. I'm assuming that you don't know this person. I mean,
Why
again,
don't we answer
you know,
both ways? You know
Jim-
them or you don't know them. We don't know, but
Well, Jim highlighted the key component is you got to have a relationship with somebody if you're gonna, confront them with an issue, and you can't make anybody, all of a sudden because of something you say that's going to make them, have a life change. Remember though, and learn. I mean, you're dealing with somebody that's not their normal self because they're under the influence of something. So that's maybe putting you in a dangerous situation. And I guess my ultimate answer would be don't confront them. If you know them enough to help them, but call 911, call the police, let them intervene, because it's a safety situation. Would you agree? Or?
Yeah, as a whole. I think that I live under a mantra that I've lived under for years, that if the pain to change is not greater than the pain to stay the same, we prefer to stay the same. It's kind of like going to the dentist. I don't really like to go, but if I get a toothache, the pain motivates me to make a change and go. Heroin addicts, if there's no pain to change, why would they change? The change is going to come from one of two places. Intrinsic, in other words, their own feelings about this. I don't want to do this, look what I've done to my life. And extrinsically, which would be possibly an arrest, family, losing. I treated a person one time that had no pain whatsoever. So I said to him, well, how long have you been a user? He'd been a user for 10 years. And I said, and in that 10 years, let's just average things out. How much heroin do you use per day? So he gave me a number. We calculated that per month, per year, and then multiplied it by 10 in 10 years. In that 10 years, he had spent $365,000 in heroin. He began to weep because he said, I've always wanted a house. I've always wanted to buy a truck for my business, and I never could. So we never know what the pain that's going to motivate a person to change is going to be. Now, I agree that it's all within relationship, but it's also within context. In the hospital, I've got a lab test in front of me. Don't tell me you're not using. I can see it, okay? So in that context, I can be a little more upfront and brutal. Or if you see somebody that's got track marks or somebody in NA, the context is a huge part of it. And this question kind of leaves out the context. Because if it's my kid, I've already got a relationship with them. I'm going to say something. If it's my granddaughters, if it's a friend, but if it's just somebody that I don't know, is my saying something going to create for them pain enough that they're going to change? Probably not, because I don't matter to them. So context and relationship is really important in answering that question.
Yeah.
thank you. And I believe our last question of the evening, we have time for this last one, which I believe will go to you, Kyle.
Okay.
Or at least start with you.
Sure.
Is there a connection between our national gun issue, school violence, and drugs?
That's a great question.
Wow.
And
Wow.
is there a connection? Well, I will tell you this. there is a statistic that's been proven true that school shooters are kids who have never been challenged. For example, some kids will have writings that their teachers will find, but the teachers won't challenge them on it. And studies have shown that those school shooters were never challenged by teachers, law enforcement, or parents. When it comes to drugs, I would say, me personally, I'm going to challenge my children all the time, my kids all the time. When people come into our booking room, we're going to challenge them if they're using or not. We'll do it in a friendly way, but we're going to challenge them if they're using or not to see if we can get them some help. Boy, this is a loaded question, huh?
Yes, very much so.
With regard to gun violence, Rick and I did a drug case. Rick Baudet, who's sitting back there trying to hide in the corner. Rick and I did a drug case last summer, and we ended up arresting 3 individuals that were bringing what's called fingers of heroin, which is it's a large amount of heroin. They were bringing it back from Haverhill, Massachusetts. All 3 of them were convicted felons, and when we pulled the passenger out of the passenger seat, he was sitting on a loaded 9mm. So we asked him, why the gun? And he said, well, I'm going into a dangerous neighborhood down in Haverhill and Lawrence, and it's to protect myself. So yes, I could say that there is a connection to protect themselves. And anybody else want to take a shot at that?
No.
Pass.
Thank you. Nice job.
I'm sure there's a connection somewhere.
Well, we've reached the 8 o'clock time to end our discussion for tonight. On behalf of the entire Newmarket Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention, I want to thank you for coming tonight to continue the conversation with us. I want to invite you again to join in this effort for Newmarket. Join in, become a member of the Alliance. Continue the conversation with us on Facebook, our website. Continue the conversation, because together here in Newmarket, we can make a difference. We will make a difference each and every day moving forward. So I want to thank you, and good night.
Thank you.